We reached this line in our code example where we are defining a sink that later we will append the result of this buffer read and decoder that it's in this next line. And here we already find two new things in this function try new. First is that this function takes some parameters or some argument, and that in this argument we have this symbol here before this name handle, which is same name as we had here. And this means that this is a reference in Rust. So this ampersand means that we're using references. But we will have to talk about references in the next tutorial. For now, let's talk about functions that take parameters. So we've talked about very simple functions without any parameters and without returning any values. We talked about functions that they return some values, and now we'll talk about functions that have parameters, as we have this try new, and it takes a parameter, and this parameter here is a output string handle, but a reference to this output string handle. So we can define functions to have parameters, and they are optionals, and parameters are special variables that are part of a function's signature. When a function has parameters, you can provide it with concrete values for those parameters. So technically the concrete values are called arguments, but in casual conversation people tend to use the words parameter and argument interchangeably, or either the variables in a function's definition or the concrete values passed in when you call a function. So here's an example. There is this another function. It takes a parameter that is number 5, and here is this another function, the implementation of this another function, and it's telling that it takes an integer 32 as a parameter. So when we pass this value 5 to this function, it will print that the value of x is the value that we passed. In this case should be 5. So we see that the declaration of this another function has one parameter. The name of this parameter is x, and the type of x is specified as an integer 32. And then when we pass this value 5 to the another function, the println exclamation mark macro puts 5 where the pair of curly brackets containing x was in the format string. And this is what is happening here. So we have these curly brackets. Inside the curly brackets we have x. X is an argument or a parameter of this function. It is of the type integer 32, and here we are calling this function and we're passing the value of 5. So the value of 5, x is 5 now, and then it will print 5 as in this example. So in function signatures you must declare the type of each parameter. And this is the deliberate decision in the Rust design, that is requiring type annotations in function definitions means that the compiler almost never needs you to use them elsewhere in the code to figure out what type you mean. But the compiler is also able to give more helpful error messages if it knows what types the function expects. When defining multiple parameters, separate the parameter declaration with commas. In this example here, for example, so now we have this function called print labeled measurements. It has two parameters. One is this number 5 and another one is this character h. And here in this function declaration we have this variable value that is an integer 32, and we also have this unit label which is of type char, and then it's doing the same thing. It's now printing, but now it's printing two values, and it's printing value which we're passing to be 5, and the unit label we're passing to be h. So the result should be that the measurement is 5h. When we run the code in this example we have exactly this 5h, because we call the function with 5 as the value for value and h as the value for the unit label. Here another explanation of functions with parameters, and they're saying that parameters are mechanisms to pass values to functions, and parameters form a part of the function's signature. Like we've seen before, the parameter values are passed to the function during its invocation. And there are two ways we can pass parameters to a function. We can pass by value, or we can pass by reference. And this is what we're doing in this case here. We're passing by reference, but we will have to talk about references in the next tutorial, because it's a very important concept. And to talk about references, we will also have to talk about ownership and about borrowing. So we will do this in our next tutorial. But for now, we're just concentrating on functions with parameters, and we've seen that we can pass by value, and a method is invoked. A new storage location is created for each value parameter. The values of the actual parameters are copied into them, hence the changes made to the parameter inside the invoked method have no effect on the argument. Another way is, instead of using pass by value, that we pass by reference. And in this case, when we pass by reference, unlike when we use value parameters, a new storage location is not created for these parameters. But to understand this, first we need to understand references, and we will therefore talk about reference in the next tutorial, and then we will come back here to conclude, to understand when we pass by reference.